Double whammy, double play, double your pleasure, discount, double check, whatever you want to call it, folks. We've got two main areas of concern as we take a look at our weather today. One from the skies in terms of space weather, where a solar wind stream is set to impact our magnetosphere in the coming days. What does that mean? Well, geomagnetic storm conditions are returning, and we're going to take a look at how that's going to affect our weather and maybe some other things too, like aurora viewing. So we're going to look at that here in a little bit. In the meantime, the other area of concern is, of course, Earth weather, and we've got severe weather out there to talk about. And we've got an ongoing heat wave, and well, will we find any relief from that? We're going to answer that question too. We're going to take a look at your long range. Of course, we're going to look at the Workweek forecast so you know how to plan the rest of your week, and we're going to test your weather IQ. As always, this is Cold Rain's Weather World, where we've got all the weather, folks, and we're going to start the show with the severe weather outlook. Boundaries, 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 cold frontal boundaries, warm frontal boundaries, stationary frontal boundaries, troughs, dew point boundaries, differential heating boundaries, and outflow boundaries. Folks, we are in a boundary-driven environment when it comes to thunderstorm production, as we often are in the summertime. We've got one of those typical summertime patterns in place, and we're seeing boundaries help focus thunderstorms at the surface. Occasionally, we get a little upper level support. We've got one such assist coming in the form of upper level support today here in the Central Plains, or the West Central Plains, really from Cheyenne down to Casper into close to Denver, Scottsbluff, and up into Rapid City, South Dakota. That's where we find the greatest risk of severe weather today. And we're seeing that in the form of wind. Here is what we're looking at here in terms of our wind threat. Hail is going to be the primary threat today, later in the afternoon and evening. Supercell thunderstorms are going to develop, and going to get a little assistance from extra cooling aloft and a little bit of wind shear to help kind of organize those thunderstorms. And the ones that are really intense are going to have super intense updrafts. Are going to be able to suspend those hailstones, allowing more freezing to occur, and you're going to get hail the size of baseballs potentially in some of these areas. And of course, the tornado threat is not non-existent, but it's quite low. We will see probably a spin up or two, but again, we're not likely to see a tornado outbreak in these areas. Tomorrow, the threat shifts a little bit over to the southeast. We looked at this yesterday. Little spin coming in off of Florida is going to help cool the atmosphere slightly in the mid levels and produce more instability and a little bit more of a focus for shower and thunderstorm activity. And so to that end, we've got a slight risk now, level 2 risk for portions of the Carolinas, including Raleigh to Charlotte, back over to Asheville, and then down into South Carolina for much of the state, Columbia over to Greenville, and then down here in toward Mobile and Pensacola, Florida, we're seeing again a chance of more in the way of severe weather down here. Isolated severe weather up and down the eastern seaboard, back into the Central Plains again, and same again on Thursday. Up here, isolated severe weather possible, and again into the southeast. General thunderstorm activity possible anywhere, but much more of an isolated type of a situation to widely scattered. Under this ridge, we have capping, and that helps to inhibit thunderstorm development. But we're going to look at the mid-level winds today, because we see that little area of support. This big trough has been sitting here in the west, just ejecting pieces of energy, and then you've got this big ridge of high pressure anchored here in the southeast, and it's just pumping moisture and flow around it. And your storms have been coming out, or your energy's been coming out kind of going like this, migrating around the ridge and been in our ring of fire pattern. And that's where you've seen the bulk of the thunderstorm development down here in the southeast. We've had a lid on the atmosphere under this ridge. Well, look at this little piece of energy coming in through Colorado today, and Wyoming kind of dies out as we get on into the late evening and overnight hours, but it'll still be there, help to focus shower and thunderstorm activity and see the flow along that boundary to the north. And that just continues as we go on out through the next couple of days. And look here, look at this little area of spin coming into Florida. And you notice those little blue colors? See that? A little bit of wind in the mid levels of the atmosphere, a little cooling with height. That's going to help aid in the production of showers and thunderstorms down south. And there's our dew points. When we look at instability, we need cooling with height. We need more moist air at the surface. Look at this big big area of moisture across the eastern section of the country. I'm going to put this into motion. You can kind of see how it gets a little lighter through the day. We're looking at 70s, dew points in the 70s, kind of dropping out as the day wears on. The heating atmosphere heats up. You get that mixing, drier air from aloft comes down, so the dew points wash out a little bit here, predominantly in the areas near the southern Alps. And then you'll see it, the colors kind of darken back up as we get into the overnight hours. And then tomorrow we get more heating. Look at these, and you see little segments of thunderstorm activity. The model's trying to show thunderstorm activity moving in, so you get a little enhancement of the colors. And then tomorrow into Thursday, things kind of lighten up again in the afternoon, but predominantly we've got a lot of moisture to work with. Thunderstorms that form are going to be efficient rainfall producers too, folks, and we've got a flooding risk in some areas. But this afternoon, future radar, look at this. Up in Wyoming, look at all these little supercells starting to develop here. That's a good representation of what's going to happen. Other storms breaking out down here in New Mexico and Colorado. Not so much a severe weather threat in New Mexico, but certainly flash flooding where we've seen rain already over the past couple of days. We're going to see more rain. We need rain in the desert Southwest, but we're getting a lot of it really quickly. A lot of other scattered showers and thunderstorms up through the Mississippi Valley into the Northeast. And as we go on through the afternoon today into the overnight hours, we start to see some of those line segments form up here in our severe weather watch area in Nebraska, into South Dakota. More rain for New Mexico, little system working through Iowa as well. So we're going to see little clusters of showers and thunderstorms throughout the night. Some of that will hold together and move on up into the Midwest as we go through tomorrow. We get into tomorrow afternoon. Look what happens. That boundary lights up again with more showers and thunderstorms. But look over here in North Carolina now. We've got an opportunity to actually see more widespread coverage of showers and thunderstorms, and you kind of see them move around erratically. Cluster of showers comes up, boom, here comes an outflow boundary, more showers come up out of that, more thunderstorms, more outflows, and all of that works together until we lose the heating of the day and things kind of settle down a little bit. But you can see down here in the panhandle of Florida, southern Alabama, another cluster of severe weather. There's one moving through South Carolina. And of course, there's your ring of fire pattern, folks. And we get on out into the overnight hours, things settle down. And that's what we're looking at over the next couple of days. We'll continue to see severe weather likely in some area of the country or another over the next 5, 6, 7 days. Things will eventually maybe settle down as we go a little bit zonal, and we'll look at that in the long range. But right now we've got your WeatherIQ continues our oceanic theme, folks. If you can call it a theme, we just started yesterday, but I've got a couple of questions over the next couple of days, so I'm calling it a theme. And here's the question. Basic question. Let's see how many of you know this. How many oceans are there on the Earth? Know the answer to that. Type it in the comments if you don't know it. Stick around at the end of the show. I'll have it for you along with another fun fact that you'll want to know. Now we're going to go ahead and move along with your work week forecast so you know how to plan the rest of your week. And we're going to start with the mid-level vapor loop. I love to look at this. It shows you a lot about what's going on. Hey, and before we do, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider signing on. We're almost at 900 subscribers, which is unbelievable and incredibly humbling, folks. I really appreciate that. Thank you for all the comments. Let me know what you're seeing where you are. If you have questions and anything I can pray over for you, I'm always happy to do that. Certainly, I pray over for you generically every day, but if there's something specific, I'm happy to pray over that as well. And just let me know where you're commenting from. I don't know where you are in a lot of cases, and certainly if you have family and friends that are interested in this kind of content, share it with them so we can continue to grow and people can see what we're doing here. And what we're doing right now is looking at this vapor loop, and look at this. Big trough centered out here over the southwest. We've been watching this. It's just shooting little pieces of energy. There's one coming out right now, and that's helping to enhance shower and thunderstorm production. Look at this big boundary between that trough and the ridge to the east. Terrible arrow. Look at that. That's maybe the worst arrow in the history of arrows, but that's where the boundary is. That's where the main flow is. Disturbed weather's coming up out of there, producing showers and thunderstorms, some heavy and heavy rain in some spots. We've got a big high pressure ridge kind of anchored out here, and I drew that in italics, and I'm not sure why I did that, but there's that high pressure ridge. Look at this. Here's that little area of disturbed weather that's swirl that's going to move through Florida in the next couple of days and enhance thunderstorms to the southeast. And down here in the Gulf, another little piece of energy. You can see all of this on the vapor loop. That's kind of cool. I like to show that from time to time. And certainly you can see the areas of rain moving up out of Mexico into the panhandle of Texas, into Kansas. A little bit of heavier rain shower activity back here over Iowa on the border of Missouri and Iowa. That's some of these showers are producing rainfall rates 2 to 3 inches per hour. Torrential rainfall as the atmosphere is loaded, folks. And so you can see that on the radar. And hey, just trust me, there's nothing else going on. Look, up and down the eastern seaboard, nothing going on. Now, if we look at our wind map for today, I'm going to switch to a different display here. You can see the wind, not too terribly strong, especially compared to what we saw early in the year, but pockets of 30, 35 mile an hour gusts, not out of the question. The Four Corners region and west and central Texas, but everybody else looking pretty good, maybe gusting into the 20s where these blue areas are, occasional 30s up here in the Great Lakes and the Northeast, but a little more wind creeping into the southeast too, but generally under that high pressure ridge, fairly stagnant air pattern. Air quality not too bad here in northern Indiana and over here along the east coast in the mid-Atlantic from Philly up toward just south of Boston. We could see some air quality and some particulates gather into the atmosphere and over in Las Vegas and near San Diego too, just east of there. So if you're sensitive to that, stay indoors. But here's the real problem, folks. We've got heat, and it's just not going anywhere anytime soon from the Mississippi Valley all the way up into the Northeast. We've got heat advisories and extreme heat warnings from the coast of Maine down into central Virginia and North Carolina, folks, where we could see heat index values exceeding 110 degrees. It was 93 yesterday here, 94 with a dew point of 80 here at my house in Morganton. And I felt like I was mowing the grass at the bottom of a pool. The heat index was 112. It's absolutely ridiculous. I hate this weather, but down here on the southern coast and the Gulf Coast into Florida, not quite as bad relatively speaking. And then flood watches up for New Mexico, where several inches of rain have fallen. A few more inches of rain could fall with these little pockets of upper disturbances coming in, acting on this atmosphere where the moisture is and all of that. So plenty, and there's burn scars down there where we've had wildfires, and so we've certainly seen some flooding in those areas. Red flag warnings up here in Utah into Kansas, so don't burn anything there. And then we've got an excessive rainfall threat, as I said, folks, down here in New Mexico. More rain could fall down here in the tune of 2 to as much as 4 inches in spots. Up here in toward the central plains as well, heading into the lower Missouri Valley, we've got plenty of rainfall around as those thunderstorms move along that stationary boundary, going to drop a couple of inches of rain in maybe 20 minutes with some of these because there's so much moisture content in the atmosphere. Same again tomorrow. That's the main risk that's highlighted, and then that moves on into the Great Lakes as we go on out into Thursday, but certainly could see pockets of heavy rain. You can see that on the surface map. I show the surface map because it's kind of what you're used to. You see low pressure, high pressure. This is kind of dirty and muddy with all of these different high pressure centers, but we've got this big high pressure ridge, frontal boundary along that acts as the focus. See, there's our boundary. You get convergence at the surface, and you're likely to see thunderstorms and showers form when you have lots of moisture and instability. Flooding threat New Mexico, flooding threat up here again in the mid-plains. There's your severe weather threat today, but any of these kind of hatched areas could see showers and thunderstorms as we move through the day. Not much changes to the pattern tomorrow. A little bit more energy coming in here to produce severe weather across the southeast. The ridge weakens a bit, helps to create an environment for more widely scattered to potentially scattered thunderstorms in spots. We saw the radar earlier, particularly along this boundaries where we'll see rainfall and then heavy rain in spots at that. And so that's what's going on here on the surface map, really looking at precipitation over the next couple of days. You can see where the main area of precipitation is. We advance this on into Thursday. Certainly going to see some more intense returns down here in the southeast, where we're seeing disturbance come in and more scattered showers and thunderstorms. As we go on through the rest of the week, we're looking at maybe as much as 3-4 inches of rain down here in New Mexico, and again up here in places like Iowa, southern Minnesota, central Wisconsin into Michigan. So pay attention for some heavy rain in those areas. Finally, some beneficial rains coming back into the southeast as well. And as we go on out through the week, kind of see the radar, how that plays out, get on into tomorrow afternoon. Let's go back. Let's roll it back so we can see all of this. So this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, we've already kind of looked at that. Wednesday, tomorrow, we've got some shower and thunderstorm activity forming. And as we get on out into Thursday, check this out. So we've got more in the way of scattered storms starting to fire along the southeast from the Gulf Coast up into the southern sections of the Northeast. Another little system moving through the Midwest into the Great Lakes. That'll all eventually die out as we go on into Thursday night. Friday, morning, Friday afternoon, we're starting to see much more in the way of scattered showers and thunderstorms break out all in our ridge zone as that ridge weakens. Maybe another little system moving along the border up here, providing some organization and a severe threat along the border. Northeast gets into the action as we get on in toward Friday evening, and everything kind of dies down in intensity as we get on into the weekend. Temperatures, not a lot of relief here in the temperature department over the next couple of few days. This is heat indexes for this afternoon. So we're looking at, what are we looking at here? 107 in Boston, up to a 102, maybe 105 in New York City, up and down the coast, 104 in Philadelphia, 109 in Washington, 111 Richmond, 110 Raleigh, Greenville 107, Atlanta 101. So we're seeing Birmingham 100-degree dew points everywhere. It's going to feel brutal out there today, folks, even back into the Mississippi Valley, hundreds here. And you start to cool down in terms of dew points, heat index values, at least as you get on out toward the west. Actual temperatures as we go through the week. So we're looking at hundreds up and down the eastern seaboard today. A little cooler out here in Oklahoma City, 92, 81 up here, 81 in Grand Rapids. We get on into the northwest, 89 in Spokane, and some 80s showing up around Seattle, places like that, the San Joaquin Valley, upper 80s, hundreds in the desert southwest. Tomorrow, a little bit better in the temperature department. The ridge is reaching its apex in intensity today, but we're still going to see plenty of 100-degree readings in the southeast and lower mid-Atlantic. You see things are starting to cool off a little bit in the northeast, but 90s everywhere here around the Mississippi Valley and the central and southern plains. A little bit cooler as some energy is working along the northern side of that boundary up here in the northern plains. So we're seeing 60s and 70s, 80s in the Intermountain West, hundreds in the desert southwest. For Thursday, things are a little bit cooler in the Great Lakes and New England, so you're getting a little bit of relief on the north side of that boundary. 80s and 90s everywhere else, and muggy, hundreds in the desert southwest, cooling as we see a system working into the northwest later on this week. And then Friday, cool in the northeast, 60s and 70s, warming back up in the plains. We're seeing 90s shoot back up close to the Canadian border, hundreds in the desert southwest. So you guys are getting hot as that trough moves out. We start to get in more of a full, continental ridge, and still warm and muggy everywhere else. And that is your week ahead forecast, folks. Now we're going to take a look at the long range and see if we can get any relief from this heat. All right, long range time. Space weather is coming up in a second. We're going to look at that solar storm. But first, let's take a look and see if we can find any relief anywhere, folks. We've got our trough and ridge pattern set up today. You can see that very nicely here. That's the flow pattern, folks. And as we go on out in time, let's see what happens. So the ridge is reaching its apex today, 900 or 597 900 decameter ridge. That would just, we wouldn't be able to live into that. 597 decameter ridge. And watch this as we go on out through the week. We get into Wednesday, Thursday. Look at this bright color start to really diminish in intensity. The trough diminishes in intensity too out here in the west. We sort of get into this zonal flow pattern. You know what I mean? That is west to east. You can kind of see that here. You see how that is sort of semi-zonal as opposed to meridianal, up and down. Easy for me to say. And that's our zonal flow pattern. That means probably going to see less in the way of precipitation across much of the U.S., certainly less in the way of severe weather. Probably the main storm track is definitely going to be across the northern tier. And so if we're going out in time, that's this weekend toward next week, still kind of zonal. But look what happens now. Look at this. As we get on into mid next week, we get a little bit of ridging out west, a little troughing in the east. That tells me that we could bring unsettled weather back into the east, at least on a quasi basis. And then, of course, temperatures cooling back toward normal. When we don't have a big ridge overhead, we're not likely to see huge swings in the positive direction from a temperature anomaly standpoint. So out in time, things kind of get a little bit murky, but that's what we're looking at as we get on into next week. How do the temperatures respond? This is the 5-day average in terms of the temperatures either being above normal or below normal. Above normal is red and oranges and yellows, below normal is blues and purples and things like that. But this is the 5-day average for the last 5 days of June, and you can see where the core of the big heat is over in the east, and a little bit so in the Intermountain West, the Colorado Plateau up into Nevada and places like that. But look at this. As we go out in time, look what happens. Get on into the first few days of July, this signal starts to weaken. So that means we're starting to see a little bit cooler in the east. And as we get way on out in time, toward next weekend, 5-day averages really come down to near normal. So that's good news if you want some relief from the big heat in the east. Here is the 8 to 14-day temperature outlook taking us to the end of the 2-week period. Look, near normal for much of the central portion of the country, from the southwest up to the northeast. A little bit of signal for below normal here in the desert southwest. Above normal, where we get a little bit more ridging out here in the west, and above normal along the far southeast coast as well. Above normal precipitation continues in places where there's been drought, and we need rain here. Not so much at one time, but still it's good to see a rain signal there, and across the south a little bit of a signal for above normal. Hawaii and Alaska looking above normal as well, and that is your long range outlook. Now let's take a look and see what the sun is doing. A solar storm is coming, folks. The question is, how big will it be? We'll take a look at that here in a second. It's courtesy, though, of this big black thing on the sun. This is a coronal hole, and because it proceeds from the north to the south, it's a trans-equatorial coronal hole. See, here's the equator of the sun, and it crosses that, thus trans-equatorial. And out of these coronal holes comes solar wind, enhanced solar wind at that. And this graph here shows that pretty well. Look at this. This is this, call it a super spirograph. If you had one of those when you were little, you could draw those little things. But there's the Earth, and you can see these bright colors represent enhanced solar wind, and it's headed toward us. Density is at the top. Usually you get a density spike preceding that, and that's what's happening now. And so we're looking at potentially G2 storm conditions. It goes from G1 all the way up to G5, so we could see G2 or G3 solar storm conditions as the solar wind interacts with the magnetic field of the Earth. And sunspot activity is prevalent as well. We saw, let's scroll to the top so we can see this a little bit better. But there's our disk. There's sunspot 41, 18, 41, 21. Actually, you click one of these, it takes you all the way down. But not a lot of complexity to these. These aren't really gaining in complexity or size all that much. If we look at these, you can see the positive and negative charges are kind of worked away from each other, and that reduces the risk of solar flares. But we'll continue to watch it and see what happens. But in the meantime, for courtesy of that solar storm, look at this. A bigger chance of aurora, so a high likelihood of aurora, and if it's clear, you may be able to see it as far south as mid-Maine, all the way down here into southern Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, southern South Dakota, Montana, and over into Washington, folks. So keep your eye to the sky tomorrow, particularly in the 26th, to see if you see any auroras. Nothing going on too much on the volcano front. Earthquake, we had a magnitude 5.7 here in Punta Cana in the Dominican Republic near Santo Domingo. So I haven't seen any reports of damage or anything, but it was offshore there. But we'll watch as solar wind interacts with the Earth. As I said yesterday, we can see an enhancement to earthquakes. There's your moon phase. Look at this. 1.3% of the moon will be visible tonight. New moon is tomorrow, so it will be a black sky. Great for aurora viewing. No light pollution there as long as you're away from the city. There's your sun and moon map, so daylight and nighttime. And there's our moon right next to the sun. That's accurate, isn't it? Not sure what's going on with that. And of course, there's only 183 days left until Christmas. Can't wait, folks. And that brings us into the answer to today's weather IQ question, okay? Remember the question, how many oceans are there on Earth? 5, 9, 7, or 6? Those are your choices. The answer is there are 7 seas, but there might be more than that now. 5 oceans, the Atlantic, the Pacific, Indian, Arctic, and Southern, also known as the Antarctic Ocean, which became officially recognized in 2000. How about that? So now you know about oceans, and one more thing you need to know about, a lot of you probably shop at Target. Got your little red card, okay? Target was actually founded in 1902 under the name Dayton Dry Goods. It was founded in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and later would become one of the largest discount retailers in the U.S. And now you know about Target, folks. We've been over the target today with our weather. I hope it's been a good show for you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. Tune back in tomorrow. We'll be here for another full episode, and we'll see what's going on tomorrow. In the meantime, hope you have a wonderful day, and this is Cold Rain reminding you other channels run 24/7, but we got you covered right here, right now at Cold Rain's Weather World 4814. Take care, folks. Have a good day.